My parents stole my startup money and forced me into their basement. Now, they clean toilets in my mall. I'm Xavier, and back in 2016, I was riding high. My tech startup had just secured its first round of funding, and at 26, I was finally seeing my dreams materialize. That's when my brother Maverick called with news that would change everything. Our parents were facing bankruptcy, and they needed help. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags, but family loyalty can blind you to the obvious. My parents, Nicholas and Kennedy, had always been masters of manipulation. Growing up, they played favorites. Maverick was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the difficult one who needed to prove himself worthy of the family name. Still, when they needed help, I didn't hesitate. I liquidated my shares in my startup and handed over nearly everything I had, $380,000 to be exact. That's when the real game began. First, they insisted I move back home to help manage the family's recovery. Then came the subtle shifts. My room was temporarily moved to the basement because Aunt Martha needs the guest room for her extended stay. Aunt Martha never came. Instead, my old room became Maverick's home office, where he'd conduct his business meetings, mostly day trading with my money while pretending to be a financial advisor. The basement wasn't just a room, it was a statement. A small twin bed, a desk from Goodwill, and a bathroom that barely worked. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how they systematically stripped away my dignity. One family gathering at a time. Every weekend they'd host these elaborate parties, the kind where everyone from church would come, bringing their perfectly behaved children and their perfectly rehearsed smiles. I'd hear them all upstairs, laughing, eating the food I'd spent hours preparing. My job: stay in the basement unless called upon to clean something, fix something, or be the butt of their jokes. "Oh, Xavier, he's going through a phase," my mother would say, loud enough for me to hear through the vents. "Some people just can't handle the real world. At least he's learning the value of honest work." Honest work meant cleaning their toilets. All four bathrooms, every day. It meant maintaining their garden, fixing their cars, and being their on-call IT support. All while they spent my startup money on new furniture and luxury vacations they claimed were business trips. My brother Maverick took particular pleasure in his role. He'd invite his friends over, and they'd make a game of finding new ways to make messes for me to clean. Xavier's training to be a professional janitor. He'd joke, it's the only career he's qualified for now. But here's what they didn't know. I was watching, learning, and documenting everything. Every snide comment, every forced cleaning session, every penny they spent of my money. It all went into a digital journal. I set up a hidden camera in my basement room. After the third time, Maverick came down to accidentally spill something that needed immediate cleaning. The real turning point came during last year's Christmas party. They'd outdone themselves with the cruelty. They printed T-shirts for everyone. Yes, actual T-shirts, with "I survived success," unlike Xavier, printed on them. They thought it was hilarious. They didn't notice me taking pictures of them wearing their matching shirts, too busy laughing at their own joke to see me documenting their mockery. What kept me going? Two things. First, my friend Aurora from my old tech days, who'd text me coding problems to solve, keeping my skills sharp and my mind focused. Second, the growing certainty that this wouldn't last forever. While they thought I was just their basement dweller, I was quietly building something new, something they couldn't touch. I know this sounds unbelievable. Sometimes I have to look at my old photos to remind myself it was real. But trust me, this isn't even the worst of it. And what happened next? Well, let's just say karma has a way of evening the score, especially when you help it along with careful planning and patience. The basement may have been my prison, but it also became my classroom. I learned more about human nature in those 7 years than most people learn in a lifetime. And I learned something else too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served with a lease agreement and a uniform policy. But that's a story for another post. Right now, I can hear footsteps above me. Someone's probably spilled wine on their imported carpet again, and guess who they'll call to clean it up. For now, I'll end with this. If you're reading this from your own metaphorical basement, keep documenting, keep planning. Keep growing, your time will come. Mine did. Update. It's funny how the smallest things can signal the biggest changes. For me, it was a receipt that fluttered out of my father's pocket while I was doing laundry. Another one of my countless duties. But this wasn't just any receipt. It was from a loan shark, and the numbers made my blood run cold. For those who read my first post about living in my family's basement for 7 years, you know the background. But what you don't know is how everything changed. How my family's house of cards came tumbling down, and how I was ready when it did. Remember my friend Aurora? While I was playing janitor, she'd been helping me build something behind the scenes. Every night, after cleaning up after another one of their parties, I'd work remotely on coding projects she'd send my way. Small jobs at first, then bigger ones. We set up a system where she'd act as the front person for my freelance work. After all, who would hire the family disgrace? The money went into a secret account. Not much at first, but it grew. Every time my mother Kennedy made another snide comment about my lack of ambition, I'd check that account balance and smile inside. Every time my brother Maverick would accidentally track mud through the house right after I'd cleaned it, I'd log another billable hour of coding. But back to that receipt. $250,000 borrowed at 30% interest, due in full in 3 months. I knew our family finances were bad. I'd been secretly monitoring their accounts since they took my startup money. But this was different. This was desperate. The cracks started showing in other ways too. The fancy cars my father Nicholas loved to show off started disappearing one by one, replaced with excuses about trying out different models. The lavish parties became less frequent and the food less extravagant. My mother's designer clothes shopping sprees. Suddenly, she was embracing minimalism. One morning, I overheard a phone call that confirmed everything. Maverick was panicking, trying to explain to someone why their investment hadn't paid off. The market will turn around, he kept saying, his voice shaking. I just need more time. Turns out my financial advisor brother had been running a small-scale Ponzi scheme with his clients' money, and it was all falling apart. That's when Aurora made a suggestion that changed everything. The mall on 5th Street is going into foreclosure, she texted me one night. The one your family always bragged about shopping at, it's going for pennies on the dollar. I'd saved up $890,000 by then, 7 years of hard work, living on nothing while they spent everything. The mall was selling for $1.2 million. Aurora helped me secure a business loan for the difference. The best part, my family had no idea. They still thought I was their basement-dwelling servant, too broken to function in the real world. The real shock came when they found out their house was being foreclosed. They'd mortgaged it 3 times over, using it as collateral for failed business ventures and to cover Maverick's investment schemes. They were about to lose everything. That's when I made my move. Through a shell company Aurora helped me set up, I bought their house at the foreclosure auction. They didn't even know it was me. They were too busy trying to figure out how to maintain their image of success while their world crumbled. The day I handed them the eviction notice was surreal. I just finished cleaning their kitchen, my usual morning task, when the courier arrived. My mother opened it, her face going pale as she read. My father started shouting about calling his lawyer. Maverick just sat there, stunned. Who would do this to us? My mother kept asking. We're pillars of the community. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed them the new deed to the house. Their house, my house. Remember all those shirts you made? I asked them. The ones about me being a failure. I kept one. I thought it might come in handy someday. But this isn't where the story ends, because while watching them realize their world was crumbling was satisfying, I had bigger plans. Much bigger plans. The mall I'd bought, it needed cleaning staff. And I had just the people in mind for the job. The looks on their faces when I explained their options, homelessness or employment under my terms, that's a memory I'll cherish forever. But the real satisfaction, that was yet to come. Final update. They say karma comes for everyone eventually. What they don't tell you is that sometimes karma needs a little help with the scheduling. For those following my story about living in my family's basement for 7 years before buying their house and the mall where they now work, here's the finale you've been waiting for. And yes, those custom t-shirts they made mocking me, they're getting plenty of use. First day of their new job orientation was something special. I had Aurora handle it, couldn't risk them seeing me smirking. She laid out their uniforms, custodial staff shirts, with their own social media mockery post printed on the back. Each shirt featured screenshots of their Facebook posts calling me a failure, their tweets about my career choices, and yes, photos of them wearing those. I survived success, unlike Xavier's shirts from Christmas. This is harassment, my mother Kennedy shrieked, holding up her shirt with her own words staring back at her. Actually, Aurora replied, sliding over their employment contracts. It's called corporate branding. You all signed off on it. Page 6, paragraph 3. My father Nicholas tried to argue that it was beneath them. Aurora just pulled up the foreclosure notices, their bankruptcy paperwork, and the documented evidence of Maverick's investment scams. Would you prefer we forward these to the authorities instead? The mall's been open 3 months now. Every morning, I watch through the security cameras as they arrive for their shifts. My brother Maverick, who used to accidentally track mud through the house, now spends his days mopping the food court. The same hands that used to dismiss me with a wave now scrub toilets in the public restrooms. My cousin Trinity, the only family member who ever showed me kindness during those basement years, works as our HR manager. She ensures everything stays just within legal bounds while maintaining detailed records of their work performance. And their performance, well, let's just say they're learning that cleaning isn't as easy as they thought. The toilets need to sparkle, I told them during my first official meeting as their boss. Just like you taught me. Every complaint they file gets met with their own words, played back from recordings I made during my basement years. Some people just can't handle real work. I quote back to my mother when she complains about the heavy lifting. At least you're learning the value of honest work, I tell my father when he protests about the long hours. The security footage has become something of a hit among the mall staff, especially the clip of Maverick trying to explain to his old country club friends why he's wearing a shirt with his own tweet. Some people belong in basements. Looking at you, little brother. Hash family disgrace. But here's the real kicker, the part that makes this revenge so sweet. Remember those fancy parties they used to throw while I cleaned up after them? Now they get to watch as I host monthly employee appreciation events in the mall's central plaza. Events where they serve drinks and clean up after everyone else, wearing their shame printed on their backs. Last week's event was particularly poetic. I had them clean the basement storage areas, all of them, while wearing headphones playing recordings of their own dinner parties from those 7 years. The sounds of their laughter, their mockery, their casual cruelty, all while they scrubbed floors on their hands and knees. How long do we have to do this? My father asked yesterday, his designer watch replaced with a cheap digital timekeeper for tracking bathroom cleaning schedules. Oh, I don't know, I replied, checking my notes. How many times did you tell guests I was going through a phase that would build character? The mall's doing well, by the way. Turns out my tech skills translated nicely into modern retail management. We're expanding next month, adding a new wing, more bathrooms to clean, more floors to mop, more karma to distribute. Aurora suggested we create a social media campaign featuring our uniquely branded custodial staff. I declined. Some things are better enjoyed in person, like watching my mother explain to her former social circle why she's wearing her own Facebook rant about me being a disgrace to the family name while cleaning up a spill in the food court. They're learning, slowly. Maverick's gotten quite good at unclogging toilets. My father's developed an efficient technique for mopping floors. And my mother, She's mastered the art of keeping her head down when her former friends walk by. The basement in their old house, my house now, has been converted into a home office. Sometimes, when I'm working late, I'll look at the small bed that used to be mine, the desk from Goodwill, the memories of 7 years of humiliation. Then I'll check the security cameras, watch my family in their branded uniforms, and smile. Karma might take her time, but when she arrives, she often brings a mop and bucket.